Hi, welcome to Crabs, Goats and Goats, episode 11 on the full moon in Scorpio, 27th of April. Looking at the transits around that, quite a lot of other stuff going on around that full moon. Plus we're looking at Taurus season, the sign of Taurus in general, and musical artists born under the sign of Taurus towards the end of the video. Thanks very much for joining me. So let's have a look first of all at the full moon. Here we see the full moon for 27th of April, the full moon in Scorpio. So the sun is in Taurus, the moon is in Scorpio, and there are other planets at play here, with Saturn squaring that opposition in Aquarius, and also Uranus, the sun approaching Uranus in a conjunction, with Venus and Mercury not also far from this sun at the full moon. So there's a lot of different energy here, so I'm going to try and break it down for you. First of all, the moon in Scorpio is always emotional, even if it's not full. The days when the moon is in Scorpio, it doesn't necessarily bring up emotional display, but the feelings are strong. At a full moon, this is a double whammy in a sense, because the pressure to bring stuff up from underneath is really there. So if there's something that needs to come up in the house of your chart where Scorpio occupies, it will probably come up at this full moon. So the fixed signs, Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius and Leo, they are about being focused, determined and not giving up. Sometimes too stubborn to give up when they should. Sometimes they keep going when they need to stop. But this is very, very good energy for committing yourself to something and going with something if you have fixed energy in your chart. However, at the full moon, there's a kind of feeling that things are going to stop. Somebody's going to say no. There's something of a breakdown going on here, because Saturn, the square between Saturn and Uranus, which is lasting all year and is prominent at different times of the year, is more prominent now because of this full moon. But also Taurus is a sign that doesn't get pissed off very easily, but with Uranus close to the sun, there's a point where it's just like, I don't want to do this. A full moon is a time when pressure builds up. It raises the stakes, and there's something about this full moon where there's like a cut-off point, where somebody is saying no, I can't do this, or the conditions need to be reviewed. There needs to be some kind of change in the conditions of what's going on to continue. So if something like this comes up, pay a lot of attention to it, because it will in the end be an opportunity to make something more with the times, more renewed, kind of stronger. So it's not a full moon that's necessarily all bad in that sense. And in fact, some rising signs have probably experienced this quite positively. Cancer, Virgo, Pisces, Capricorn, these signs probably, if you have those as an ascendant in your chart, then actually this full moon could be quite useful in bringing up stuff that needs to be brought up. And even if you are fixed sign heavy in your chart, then it still could bring up stuff that's useful to deal with an issue that needs to be dealt with. It's not the most dramatic of full moons, but it does have a lot of tension. It does have a lot of pressure. So it's important that this full moon not to be that person that kind of cuts your nose off to spite your face, because there's a little bit of possibility of that. It's more a time to settle and find what is good for everyone in a sense. So a full moon illuminates what needs to be dealt with, and this is about the material versus the emotional. So Scorpio is emotional, and Taurus is material. So Taurus is the builder, a slow builder. It takes things slow and makes sure the ground conditions are right. and Scorpio is more about what does this really mean? Who really is in control here? And this is a bit of a challenge. If you think of a relationship where one person is taking too much control, a relationship where one person wants to call all the shots, right? This is a kind of point where there's a cutoff. There's a kind of point here where there's a point where somebody's going to put their foot down. Kind of wake up call point, if you like, this full moon. But it also, as I said, highlights this Uranus-Saturn square, which is running through the whole year and will be exact. The next time it's exact, I think, is in June. So it's a little bit of time before it runs exactly. But when the Sun is in Taurus and conjuncting Uranus and then squaring Saturn, of course, these issues of that this square brings up are going to come to the surface. Well, Uranus and Taurus, Uranus is about changing something that needs to be changed, but also bringing sudden developments that we weren't expecting. Saturn is the opposite. It's about conserving what needs to be conserved, about responsibilities and duties and keeping things in order. So this square is kind of busting through what we know, what we think of as fixed forever or there forever, and coming saying why. This doesn't have to be this way. This can change, and actually it's going to change you whether you like it or not. So the kind of issues that Uranus is to do with, like technology and communication, against structure and government, which is Saturn, the way that we need these structures to keep things in place. So this full moon could see some challenge to long-term structures or older structures that need to be modernized. It doesn't necessarily mean that's from below to above. It could be the other way, with a more hardline approach from above. I mean, this is also Saturn in Aquarius. That it rebels, like governments rebelling against people challenging it as well, which also is a Pluto in Capricorn influence. So on a wider political level, I'm really not sure how this is going to play out, but there could be in the next couple of days some interesting developments in terms of structure. There was a very interesting story in the UK in English football. Even if you're not a football fan, you could find this interesting, that there was a power grab by the richest clubs in European football, where they wanted to create their own league, and this was done when the Sun and Mercury were still in Aries. They announced this last week on Sunday night, that they were going to do this, and by Tuesday, when the Sun and Mercury had gone into Taurus, the players and the coaches and the fans of the same clubs that wanted this extra power were saying, no, we're not going to do this. Yeah, this is one step too far from the richest clubs, and this for me symbolizes this energy very much. Of this dynamic of a resistance to a power structure that was actually very lazy in the way that it did it. It didn't even plan. They didn't even have a plan for what they were going to do. They just went like, we're going to do this. Didn't have a deal with a broadcaster. Didn't really sort of work out exactly how it was going to play out in terms of whether teams were still going to continue in their domestic leagues, whether players could continue playing in the World Cup. So the kind of the resistance to what would normally be seen as a very powerful group of clubs was really quite amazing to see. So this is something that Taurus does. It sticks in the mud and it says, I don't want to move, you can't push me around, which is the good side of Taurus. On the other hand, it is a sign that sometimes it's very slow to get going. It's very slow to move. So that you've got the two sides to that. Which brings us to a wider look at the sign of Taurus, which is what I'm going to do next. So Okay, so Taurus is the second sign of the zodiac, coming after Aries. So Aries is enterprising, courageous, brave, and goes forward and doesn't have any fear. And then Taurus comes in and goes, hang on a minute, you can't go off there without looking where you're going, and what are we doing exactly here, and is the basis for this actually solid? Is the material foundation solid? Taurus wants security, and it wants to build from the bottom to make sure that things are safe and things are not too dangerous. So Taurus is like the brake, putting the brakes on after the accelerator of Aries. So as such, it gets a bit of a boring reputation because it seems to be about being slow and conservative and not taking risks, not wanting change. But it's a bit more complex than that. Although these qualities, obviously, there's some truth in them. But the slowness of Taurus is more. It's not so much slow as methodical and consistent. So it keeps going and going and going. And when it's focused on something, it will get something done, and it doesn't matter how long it takes, and it will get it done. And then if that could include something exciting, it could include something radical actually, but it's done in a Taurian way of, okay, we're going to keep going, we're not going to let other people change this or get too disturbed by things that are out of our control. We're concerned about what we can control, what we can influence, and we stick to that and make it work. So it's earth and fixed, and it's about durability, and it's about real content, something more than just symbolic or for show. It's interested in doing something that really means something. So this conservative image of Taurus is quite curious as well, because if you look at some of the most radical figures in political history, Sam Reynolds has talked about this a lot, then they're born under the sign of Taurus. So Karl Marx, Adolf Hitler, and Malcolm X, all born under the sign of Taurus, and what they do have in common is this complete obstinacy to push forward with what their vision is, based on a very actually simple idea. Either, obviously in the Adolf Hitler case, a horrible one, but very simple ideas that are understandable to a lot of, like, people can understand very easily, but also very consistent. So yeah, it doesn't mean that Taurus wants everything to stay the same, but it does mean that it connects to something and sticks with that thing, and it's difficult to push it off course once it's on that course. So you get the idea of the kind of tortoise against the hare in terms of the speed that it goes at, and obviously Taurus is, as an artist or as a worker, can consistently produce to a good level over a long period of time, and this is the strength of the sign, in a sense. So it's about value, and it's about understanding the value of what really means something to the individual. And with Venus as its ruler, there's a strong sense of enjoyment as well as work of Taurus. There's a strong sense of making the most of what you have, and a strong attachment to things that brings it security. And these can be just material, in some cases, a house or possessions, but also attachment to things that give its life meaning. So it doesn't have to be just materialistic. But if you know Taurus, people who are born under this sign, you'll know that it's very important for them to feel secure and safe, and not not have things too open-ended or risky. Of course, it depends on the natal chart. If only the sun is in Taurus, and then other planetary positions are in fire signs or Gemini, or something a bit more open to change or risk, then yeah, it's not always the case. But Taurus is a sign is about this richness of appreciation of things that are kind of classical and beautiful and aesthetic, and a kind of a statue in the a very beautiful statue, and is like the kind of embodiment of the kind of Taurus idea in this respect. Okay, so let's now look at the musical artists born under the sign of Taurus. Okay, let's have a look at some of the musical artists born with the sun in Taurus. So singers, songwriters, rappers born under this sign, musicians. So first thing that's interesting is there are 4 country music artists that are very big: Willie Nelson, Tim McGraw, Glenn Campbell, Tammy Wynette. And I suppose country music and Taurus could be a connection there with the traditional side of things. But these artists, all 4 of them, they didn't really just stick in the genre. They had a fan base that transcended that, and they attached themselves to things that meant something to them and created a musical identity that was very them. Glenn Campbell, Tammy Wynette, perhaps she's the most traditional of those. Willie Nelson, and then you look at Stevie Wonder and James Brown, also Taurus sons. In a kind of similar way, they came from a genre that they created their own identity and their own brand. And there's something very comforting about the sign of Taurus, and Stevie Wonder is one of the most kind of comforting musical artists there is, in terms of making people feel warm and safe. James Brown very much just did something again and again that really worked, but was very, very in terms of style, was really deep in terms of what he influenced. If you look at the James Brown records of the early 70s, these provided the influence for the hip hop of the mid 80s, and the musicians that he worked with were amazing musicians. Billy Joel and Bono Vox. Some people think Bono Vox is a bit overbearing, which is one of the kind of Taurian traits at their worst. David Byrne and Brian Eno. David Byrne of Talking Heads and Brian Eno originally of Roxy Music. Really strong musical artists in the sense of depth, and they did a very good record together in the early 80s called My Life in the Bush of Ghosts, which was way ahead of its time musically. The British rapper JME, and Giggs, who have worked together, both Londoners who worked together, coming out of the grime scene. And it's quite interesting that grime's most legendary names, there's quite a few earth signs in there, which would be with grime, I suppose, whereas hip hop is more biased towards, there's a bigger bias towards air signs, if you look at the legendary names in hip hop. So and if you listen to grime, it's kind of down to earth. It mentions daily stuff, mentions stuff we see. It doesn't big up the glamorous lifestyle so much, it doesn't do that as much as American hip hop does. But there are some hip hop names on this list: Ghostface Killer, legend from the Wu-Tang Clan, and Busta Rhymes, Pusha T, Travis Scott. Yeah, that just about wraps it up for the musical side. There's always something very, very classical about a Taurus, the way they go about what they do. They want, they're giving something that will last a long time. And I think and a lot of those names on the list, you see that durability of their music coming out. It doesn't necessarily fit the fashion of the time, especially, and is lasts a longer time. Of course, you could find exceptions to that within the list of sun sign Taurus artists, but the ones that I'm looking at here, they have this sense of this music lasts a long time, and some of them have become more popular since they were originally around. James Brown, for example. So that concludes my wrap up with of the sun sign of Taurus. As ever, thank you very much for watching. There'll be another one in a couple of weeks on the new moon in Taurus, and I've got something a bit different planned for Gemini season if it happens, but I'm not sure it will, but we'll see. So have a great full moon, and I will see you soon. Bye bye.